Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's vOLTHA TST. Thanks for joining, and thanks a lot, Theo, for holding the last one while I was on vacation. Glad we managed to do it. Very happy about that. And as usual, the meeting is public and recorded, and will be shared live on YouTube. So please be mindful of the comments you make and the information you share. Today, just a little bit of an update from the gRPC URL. There is not really much we can discuss because Ken is out. The update still lies on the fact that there's some tests that pass, most tests pass actually. Some still don't, but we're fairly close. I was really happy to know about this closeness of the different the gRPC swap. So that's it on the gRPC swap. What I would like to focus the meeting on is Matteo giving us an overview of the structure of the vOLTHA app that he rewrote. He has a working code base, and while there might be some changes that might need to be applied and some few things that might still need to be done, I think this is in a very good shape. So Theo, do you want to take it over?
Yes, I have a couple of slides to share. So if you can make me presenter.
Absolutely, let me do that.
Screen.
Yes. You are co-host now. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll let you do it.
Okay, are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So as most of you know, in the last 2-3 weeks, I spent a bunch of time rewriting from scratch the vOLTHA application. And the reason because of why we did that is that the original application was written as a proof of concept back in 2015. And when that happened, we were focusing on showing that the entire ONOS plus vOLTHA to manage a PON network was a feasible thing. Since then, a lot of complexity has been added to the application, and there has been no major redesign of the application itself. So when it started, we were only supporting the AT&T workflow because they were the major service provider interested in the process. And it was definitely not focused on scale. Since then, we added support for different workflows with a variety of configuration. We added support for scale. But the way the app was designed was not with a scale first approach in mind. And aside of that, all the asynchronous events that happen in the application were driven via futures that proved to be very tricky when you have to support different use cases for which some events are required and some others are not. So we decided to re-implement the application. Of course, as you can imagine, the majority of the code is still the same because the flows have not changed, the events have not changed. Just the internal structure of the application has changed for an easier management, to make the application easier to scale, and most of all, to make it easier to understand and handle the asynchronous events like the creation of a meter or the creation of a flow. So the basic design principle is built around a queue in the application. So anytime an event happens, we add that event to the queue, and events can be a port that goes up or down, a new port that is added, a device that is removed, a subscriber that is provisioned, and so on. And basically, there is an handler that runs in in his own thread and picks up one event at a time, spins up a new thread and processes these events. Anytime the handler does this, the event is removed from the queue. And in case of success, it is just processed and nothing more happens. But there are some cases in which the flow will, the processing will actually fail, where a failure doesn't necessarily mean an error. But for example, when we have to provision flows, we need to make sure a meter for those flows is present. If the meter is still in the process of being created, then we can consider that as a failure. And when that happens, the event is basically put back into the queue at the end of it. The reason we're putting it back at the end of the queue and not at the beginning is that in that way we can start processing other events. So in case they depend on different meters, for example, or different condition in the system, we start triggering the creation for all the meters that are needed. And meanwhile, these meters are created, we can process events. And hopefully when we get back to the first one at the end of the queue, the meter will be there and we'll just proceed creating the flows. Is there any questions so far?
Yes, I got a couple. One is, are the handlers per device?
No, the handler is common for all the devices, but that's because the handler basically just picks up the event, look at the kind of the event, and calls the correct event handler in a separate thread.
Okay. And for the requeuing events, can't that lead to other failures? For example, well, kind of the one we're dealing with, if there's a delete followed by an add, and the delete fails, the delete gets requeued at the bottom, the add succeeds, and then the delete comes and removes the adds.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure requeuing is always the right case here.
So the issue you described is not exactly what is happening in my understanding.
I'm not saying it's happening today, but isn't that the case if you're requeuing failed events? If I have a delete that fails, I requeue it. If there's an add then that happens, it's going to get clobbered when that delete the requeued delete happen or gets activated.
Yeah. I see what you mean. So what we call a failure is actually not an error in the delete, for example, or in installing the flows. In that case, we don't retry if there is some error in generating the flow. We retry when there is something that is holding up the state in the system. For example, if we want to, in the AT&T case, we want to provision a subscriber, we need to make sure that the equal flow with the default tag is gone. And until that's the case, we keep putting it back in the event. So the flow is provision the subscriber, the handler manages it, check that the equal flow is still there, puts it back in a queue.
But doesn't Onos handle this kind of requeuing itself? If you assign a flow to it, a meter, if I assign a meter and a flow that uses that meter, won't Onos by default attempt to push those flow objectives? And yeah, they may be pushed out of order, but until eventually they'll both get added, right? Eventually the meter will be added, and then once the meter's added, the flow will be added. So it seems like Onos already has this kind of processing. So I'm wondering if requeuing the event is...
We need the meters to be present as we're adding the meter information in the metadata of the flow in the vOLTHA case.
I understand, but so what happens today in Onos when I have a meter and a flow that uses the meter, and I push the flow before I push the meter, and then I push the meter? Aren't those both in kind of a pending state in Onos? And yes, the flow will fail when it tries to append to add because the meter doesn't exist. And then the meter will hit and the meter will happen. And then Onos itself will requeue the flow, and the flow will be pushed second again.
There are some failures within the Volta core if you push the things not in the proper order. That is the current scenario, and that is the understanding that Matteo started with. So I think yeah, go ahead, Theo.
The main reason is that we need to make sure the meter is created within ONOS before generating the flow, because the flow carries a reference to the meter ID in the metadata, but we cannot know the meter ID till it is created within ONOS.
Okay. Okay, I understood that. If I can't create the flow without the meter ID, then yes, you have to have that meter ID. And if that's not specified by the user, yeah, I can understand why you need to create that as an object first in ONOS. And that's fair. It just seems, I'm just really worried about this requeuing process because ONOS already has a requeuing process or retry process. And we're kind of stacking retries on retries. And I worry again in this add delete situation if this isn't going to introduce new errors.
So ONOS as a retry in case the flows, for example, are not installed, and that means they are not acknowledged via flow stats. But we're not dealing with those kind of failures here. Here we're more, I definitely picked the wrong word with failure. We're dealing with, we need to wait for this to happen before we can proceed.
Matteo, I'm also, suspicious about this queuing mechanism. Actually, I agree with David, and I think it should be handled very carefully for each case. I don't know if, if you, for example, if you try to add a flow and it failed, and at this time you received a delay for the same flow, say. So what happens? You lost the.
So if the flow fails, we consider that. So we consider a success when the flow is added to the ONOS core. Then
yeah, so
Theo's managing that. So let me get to this slide that may answer your question a little better.
Theo, just give me 1 second. Mahir, David, what Theo called failure here is the state not being present or actions not having been taken, but these are not like flow related failure. These are like the EPOL flow has not been yet removed, but not that the EPOL flow failed to remove. That is completely handled by ONOS down below. So that is not getting changed. What Theo called failure here is more of a not ready state, if I may change the name. To me, the way Theo described it to me, that's how it is. And this is what is described in the diagram here. So I think, try to think it that way and not like, oh, we try and add this flow and it fails and then ONOS retries. We don't even get to there because we don't even call the flow add if the state is not ready.
So okay, I get the check. It's kind of a precondition check. And so I don't know how the preconditions are determined, but it also means that even if it's a precondition check, by requeuing the event at the end, you're changing the order of events that are coming into the queue.
Yeah,
and changing the order of events can have consequences, unforeseen consequences in some situations, I suspect.
Yeah, this is also the main reason I'm objecting this. So
the question is, if that precondition is not met, shouldn't essentially the queue be halted for that device until its precondition is met? If we want to keep these events in order.
Yeah, that is a good point. That is definitely doable, and also separating the queue per device is not a big problem. Let me actually take some notes.
If the reason we're doing this is only the meter provisioning, I mean, we were thinking to separate the meter provisioning from flows, and we can do it now.
I'm not sure I got what you meant, Mahir.
If
So
you're
the-
doing this requeuing for only because of the meter provisioning, I mean, when you provision the flow, there is no meter, so you have to wait for that. We were thinking to separate meter provisioning from flow provisioning and bring
So-
a new API to provision meters first, then
So
provision
here,
flow.
that was never discussed nor agreed upon. Let me
Yeah.
again state why we are doing this. We are doing this because the application is not supported at scale. We saw some issues at scale, and we want this app to be slotted into the 2.8 release as well. So this is the base. We are going to implement it without any change in the APIs. Then we can discuss about separating meter and flow creation. There are positive and negative things about that. I have my ideas. There are pros and cons. Not to be discussed right now. There's definitely that option simplifies what Theo is showing here, but still, there are a few things that might need to be checked because nothing guarantees you that if you call the create meter API before the flow create API, the meter is actually going to be created first. So long story short, I think while your solution, your proposal simplifies things, it's not yet there to be implemented.
Okay, I got this, but I mean, we talked about this before, but as I said, if it is getting, it makes it complicated, we can discuss it. If everybody is on this same point, we can discuss it and take the decision. If this is the only reason that make this application more complex and this quick mechanism, so we can discuss to change it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, while you guys might be okay with this, I'm not sure about Deutsche Telekom. I think one API would be best for them. And also, if we do change this, there's no way we're going to put it back into 2.8. So supporting 2.8 at scale on the long run becomes almost impossible. And to the point that Matteo made at the beginning, the application has become unbearably complex. And that is the reason why we're changing this. So while I do see value in the point you're making, that was not the goal we set out with. The goal we set out with was, let's rewrite it, let's bring it back to a clean code on top of which we can then implement things.
Okay, I don't insist on it.
Okay, so to get back to the failure example I made before, for example, when we have a port added or updated events gets put into this queue, we process the event. There is no subscriber provision, but let's make the example that the default equal flow is required. If the meter is not present, what we do is that we send a request to create the meters, and then we put this event back in the queue. And now I agree with David's point that we shouldn't be putting it at the back, because meanwhile the port state could have changed, and so this could lead to inconsistencies. At this point, this queue will probably need to be moved to a unimport level, so we have one queue for connect point. And in that way, we can guarantee that the order is always the same without slowing down the application. Anyway, there are a bunch of conditions that needs to be met before we can actually provision the flows or proceed with subscriber provisioning. And all of these conditions that needs to be met are managed by just having the queue retry till the condition is met. This is pretty much the up-to-date diagram. It reflects all the paths that are in the code, and I added it in the README file for future references. The current status of the application is that yesterday we got the first success at scale on the AT&T workflow with 1,024 subscriber. This process is not super stable yet because because of the issue with the flow ordering we are chasing in the core. And there is definitely one case in which the core can duplicate a delete request for a flow that needs to be addressed. And there are various discussions going on how to address that, but the application seems to perform well while running with a higher number of subscribers. And I suspect that implementing multiple queues will all improve the application efficiency.
You know how these numbers compare to the existing application? Just out of curiosity more than anything else.
It's pretty much in the same ballpark. I haven't, so it generally, I've seen this passing 5 or 6 times, and it ranges between 420 and 480 seconds, while the regular application ranges between 460 and 520. So it's slightly faster, not incredibly faster. I suspect in the AT&T workflow, this is due to the fact that we actually need to wait for the flows, for the equal flows to be removed from the devices before pushing the new one.
So given this, the rewrite is for a lot of reasons, but one of that is for scale, and we're seeing similar numbers. What aspect of this design actually is, what's the current bottleneck in scale in the current application? Or is it a bottleneck in scale, or just it's kind of grown in complexity as it's evolved and it's time to do a refresh?
It's definitely more of the second.
Okay.
It gets a little tricky to handle things at scale, but not from a performance perspective. It's just complex in the code.
Okay, makes perfect sense. Thanks.
So most of the dead time in processing that I'm seeing in both application, that, for example, before between the ONU activation in vOLTHA, and the flow validation and the flows being pushed, we send a request to create a single meter in vOLTHA that takes roughly 10 to 15 seconds to complete, regardless of the application. And that time cannot be improved because the way the flows and the meters are acknowledged is via flow stats, and ONOS only fetches those every 5 seconds.
Okay. Is there any concern about memory footprint size in terms of the queue length?
Good question. I haven't seen it. I haven't monitored yet the memory, but I don't think it will make a big difference in the ONOS footprint.
All right, thank you.
Apart the scale, we run the functional test on the application. We run sanity on it on BBSIM. Sanity passes for the 3 workflows. Functional test based on BBSIM have been run for the AT&T workflow, and all of them pass. So that's very good news. During this week, I'm going to run the same test suite on the Deutsche Telekom and Turk Telekom workflow.
Matteo, sorry if I ask for the previous slide one more question. Could you just explain how many port discoveries are there? So when you say ONU activation, how many ONUs are there? Is that?
So this is with 1,024 ONUs. Each ONU has 4 unis, but only one uni is enabled on each ONU.
I see. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So
thank you.
4,096 ports are reported to ONUs, but only 10,024 are active.
Yes. And these are how many OLTs?
This is 2 OLTs with
2 OLTs. Yes, as always. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Sure. So just an overview for the future. What we still have to do is to implement the REST APIs to provision services based on the port name and provision custom VLANs. One quote-unquote big task, meaning that will bring very good improvement, but is not like a big coding task, is to change the maps I've used so far into the ONOS distributed primitives so that the internal state is persisted in atomics, and then to run tests on hardware. This needs to happen in this order because as of now, even though the application technically works in an ONOS cluster, being the state not distributed, it won't survive the test for the ONOS restart. And then we'll need to increase the unit test coverage and provide some more documentation on the application. That's basically it. If you want to try it out in your setup, I can point out to a vOLTHA ONOS image that has the application pre-built in, and I can point you to the code. As Andrea said, there are still some tasks to do, but nothing major. One thing that I will add here after today's discussion is to definitely implement one queue per connect point, or at least one queue per device.
And then also along that, right, when you requeue events, just maintain the order.
Yeah, that will be the only reason to divide the queue.
Yep. Just
So
means you're putting things at the. Just means you're not always adding to the end of the queue. Sometimes you're adding to the head of the queue, kind of thing.
Yeah, that could be one thing. Having a smarter queuing mechanism, where instead of always putting at the end, you decide whether to put it at the start or at the end, depending on what type of event it is, or also if the queue is empty and things like that.
Yeah. The key is really just to ensure the event order is maintained, particularly when it's important that it may be maintained.
Yeah, exactly. The key thing I think is port state. The port state is the key element that
actually
that we need to check.
The order needs to be maintained on a connect point basis, and a connect point in ONOS is a combination of a device ID and a port number. So basically that the events for each port are in order. Being those another subscriber event on that port or a port up or down, they need to be maintained in the same order.
So port here means UNI and NNI?
UNI, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the NNI doesn't really fit in. So we're not using the queue for the NNI because the operations on the NNI are fairly simple compared to what needs to happen for a subscriber. The NNI is super straightforward, meaning the port comes up, add the default flows, the port goes down, remove the flows.
I have another question, not sure if this is relevant. Is this queue stateful? I mean, looks like we need to handle certain messages in a sequence. So is this synchronized across other apps in the cluster? And what happens if this ONOS instance that's handling this restarts? Is that even relevant or?
That fits into this point that for now the queue is not distributed, but if I'm correct, and Andrea correct me if I'm wrong, ONOS has a distributed queue so that the queue is actually replicated in different instances.
Yeah, we do have a distributed queue primitive.
Okay.
So that's why I said we need to do this before at least testing that ONOS instance restart on hardware. Because as of now, may or may not work depending if you're killing the instance to which the device is connected or not.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, this is all that I had for the application. Thanks everyone for the comments. I'll make sure, especially this part here, gets implemented.
So a couple of things. If anybody has thoughts on things that it would like the application to improve, especially for example, Mahir, in terms of APIs, in terms of features, in terms of things that they're not in the app not right now, I encourage you guys to set up a list or send me a list, like give it to us. I can set up a document then, and that can be opened up for discussion. And having taken a look at a little bit at the code yesterday with Theo and at the diagram and having discussion with him, the processing other entry points, other APIs, for example, DT's API where they call just the add of the specific VLANs or other elements. It's fairly easy because it's a fairly modular system. You just catch the entry and send an event to the queue in a little different way. So if you have any thoughts, just send it to us. For example, the separation of the meters and the flow creation, it's fairly straightforward because you just add the items to the queue with the different timing, and it's already going to be there, the meter when the flow event in the queue arrives. So that's one way to do it.
Sure.
Okay, Andrea, I'm gonna to stop sharing and send it back to you.
Yeah, I'll take it back. Thanks, Theo. Okay. So the code, as Theo said, is here. You guys can take a look at it. I'll probably spend some time reviewing it tomorrow, so to check some of this stuff. There are a few other items that I wanted to highlight that we did. One was that we merged the container resource lower boundaries and upper boundaries, even though the upper boundaries are not set right now. They're set to null. So you can just, it just uses as many resources as it can. But now our Helm charts have the support to fix the number of resources that you want as a particular vOLTHA component to use.
Are those set via values so they can be overridden on the command line?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
You can take a look at how it's done over here, but just pick an example. In the OpenOLT values, you just have this.
All right, thank you.
And this is a null element, and it's treated as a null, so it's treated as it's not non-set. But if you change this to something, it will be used. Thanks to Andre from Reply for this. So that's good. There was one thing that I also wanted to bring to everybody's attention, that there was a discussion some time ago between a few people, Himani from Siena, Girish, myself, Mahir and Serkan from Turk Telecom, about the LOS alarm. And there seemed to be an issue where if you pull the cable very slowly out of a transceiver and a PON port, the BAL will not recognize and will not throw the proper alarms. But that seemed to actually be fixed by Broadcom in the latest release, so that's really good. And given that we are going to move to 3.10, and this is being fixed in 3.8, I'm talking about BAL versions, we should be fine in having in not having this problem anymore, and we should be fine distinguishing, as we were doing before, all the different type of LOS alarms. Any questions? So we gave a -1 to the patch. The patch is still there. It's just -1 has been abandoned, and we will not fix this at the moment with a workaround in VOLTHA. We'll just wait for the 3.10 BAL release, which is going to be the LTS. It's going to be an LTS release, which we will move before VOLTHA 2.9 gets released. Any questions?
Yeah, I see in the release notes that it's fixed. I hope it's really fixed. Yeah, let's verify, and if it's still we have problems, we may then come back to this workaround.
Absolutely. I was basing myself on trust. If that is not the case, then we will have to revisit this. But I really do hope that if somebody writes that it's fixed, it's actually fixed. Okay. On the MPLS side, we got the reply we wanted from Manuel on the assume that if the MPLS is enabled, it applies to all the devices and subscriber. But I would like to understand, given that I was not here, what was the reasoning behind this ask? Because we have many flags that can be applied on a per subscriber basis, like is IGMP required, is DHCP required? Why are we dealing with this in a different manner, and it needs to be an all or nothing? Maybe Amit or anybody who has an answer to this can tell me.
So I think it's just a configuration thing. Meaning that if it's all the OLTs, you can just put a configuration in the app and you configure it for every device. If it's not, we have to go into SADIs and change the per device configuration.
Or even, well, yeah.
Or net config or whatever you want to put it, but it cannot be a global flag. I don't think it really changes anything for the MPLS configuration per se. It's just where do we need to put the trigger to add that configuration or not.
Okay. Guys, any thoughts? I'm fine having it on a per device basis, or sorry, per app, like per system, given it's an all or nothing. But maybe on a per device basis is actually better. So we should probably go into status. Amit, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree to that. Yeah.
So should we give it on a per device basis?
Per device will definitely cover both use cases, so I'm fine with that.
Okay. Okay, the last, any more updates on MPLS? There is the core patch, which is ready, which is just not merged yet because Ken's on vacation, and given that there is no urgency in this, I'd like him to take a look, plain and simple. So it's not in, but we will get it in most likely at the start of next week when Ken is back from his vacation. I double checked this with Amit, and he's okay with that, so we can just do it right now. Okay, the last item, Theo, did you put this on the agenda last time?
I think David
Yep.
put it. I'm all
Yeah.
for it. We just need to find the right way to do it.
Okay. Any thoughts? You guys have any preference on how to do it? I'm okay with this. We can drop everything like that. I was even considering like dropping the outwards facing GitHub for replication of the code, but up to you.
I'm good with this. At this point, if it's in Garrett, I'd probably keep shadowing it to GitHub until we delete them or archive them or however we can do that. But for a deprecation period, this sounds fine. The only question I have is, do you post fix it or suffix it with deprecated or prefix it with deprecated? I don't know what this. I don't know if there's a best practice.
I actually don't know how easy it is to rename repositories.
Yeah, that was my concern. I don't think we can do this. Actually, it's better to me if we don't. We can like put red flags everywhere, but renaming the repo is something that I think throws a wrench in Gerrit and the replication in GitHub. I would just avoid it. It's not that important. We just put a banner, remove the README, just leave unsupported.
That's fine. Can we, as we in the README and add the deprecation notice, is that going to include a hey, this repo is going to be deleted in 6 months, a year type of thing?
I would be okay with that. We never had a deprecation policy of repos, but I'm fine with say 1 year.
Okay.
Or let's say the end of the LTS release cycle, which is 15 months from now. Okay. We put out an LTS. Anything that is not touched within the LTS is just going to be dead. Just a quick question, David, are you going to take care of this?
I think that's something we need to do internally, Andrea.
I mean, putting a README.
Oh no, yes, putting the deprecation thing, everyone can do it, but
I can't block merges on Garrett.
Yeah, that's up to us. I can take care of this. After I'll do it obviously after the comment with the deprecated. thing. Was there any other repo that you guys know about that we should put in here?
You may just want to move a vOLTHA BBSIM from where it is to the list of actual repo. But
And there was an OMCI library that old vOLTHA VBC was using. I don't remember the exact repo name, but
OMCI lib.
yes.
That's part of vOLTHA, so isn't it?
No, he's talking about a very
Oh,
ugly
yeah.
thing that you shouldn't ever look at.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else? Not that I'm aware of.
Sorry, Andrea, my bad. It was OMCI sim, not OMCI lib.
Okay, yeah, I remember MCI sim, but okay, fine. I don't think we should put kind vOLTHA in here, but for now, at least.
I mean, kind volt at this point, if it doesn't work anymore, and I haven't run it in a long time, it probably needs to be deprecated if no one's supporting it.
We have put in place a red banner. Theo put it that when you download kind vOLTHA and you try it, you have to like physically accept, proactively accept the fact that it's deprecated. It gives you, do you want to continue thing? I'm okay putting it in here if you guys think it's we can remove it in a year.
Kind vOLTHA already has a banner in the README.
Yeah. Okay, then let's do this.
I'm not
Add it
sure
here.
who put it there, but it's there.
Was it not you?
So
in the
if you
comment?
open it on GitHub, you'll see it. Actually, I put it there.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, something like this can be what we use for other repos as well. So let me actually put this. Okay. The old version of BBSim, Theo?
That's vOLTHA BBSIM.
Ah, okay, perfect. I thought that was some repo thingy. Not BBSim, but okay. Good. Okay, so that was all I had on the agenda for today. But does anybody have anything that they want to bring up? Okay, then if not, thanks for joining, and I'll publish the recording as soon as possible, and I'll talk to you again next week. Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
All right.